Roger, you can smell this summer sweet clethra almost a mile away.
It's Clethra ulnifolia, a native North American shrub.
You know, it's hardy to zone 4. It likes a wet location, full sun, part shade.
And this cultivar, which is ruby spice, stays in bloom longer than any of the others. Hello, I'm Roger Swain from Horticulture Magazine.
And I'm Paul Tukey from People, Places and Plants Magazine, and welcome to this week's show. In our People segment, we're going to meet Sari Behringer, an organic gardener from Maine. After that, we're going to check out another great blooming shrub, the lilacs, at the Arnold Arboretum in Boston.
Meanwhile, I'm going to be planting tomatoes.
And some food for thought.
Yes, on why the annual flower you buy that's in full bloom is not the best.
It's all coming right up.
Don't go away.
Growing up on the dairy farm, my grandmother used to encourage me to run around barefoot and get the manure between my toes. She said it would make me grow tall. My grandparents even offered to give me their dairy farm, but I rejected the offer, opting to go to college and get a good paying job. So many young people are rejecting farming and gardening as a career option these days, it's almost scary. But today, we're going to meet Sari Behringer. She's decided, against all odds, to make gardening and farming her career.
Most of our ancestors were small farmers by necessity. Now, most college graduates would never even consider the idea. Young people like Sari Behringer are keeping a way of life alive.
So here we are at Elliott Coleman's research farm in the middle of Maine, the middle of nowhere, and it seems like an unlikely career choice for a girl from Idaho in her 20s.
Yes, well, largely fate brought me here. I have a partner who lives here, and as you know, we live in end of the earth, basically, of Maine, and it's beautiful, but there's not a lot of job opportunities, and it just happened to be that I lived right down the road from Elliott Coleman, and it was really hard to find winter employment, being that this is a tourist-based economy.
Sure.
And I decided to come and work here for one of the winters, and I just fell in love. I mean, if you have seasonal affective disorder at all, this is the place to be because it's bright, it's beautiful.
Right.
You're surrounded by vibrant, incredible plants.
Well, what about farming or gardening as a career?
Well, and now that I've found that I've loved it so much, I'm trying to do everything I can in order to make ends meet, to be able to sustain myself.
Sari is the first ever paid employee of legendary organic gardener and author Elliott Coleman.
Well, Sari is a wonderful employee, a model employee. We couldn't do any better than that. And the difficulty for the small farm is to find people of that caliber, very often who want to work on the small farm, but who, when they see the salary that the small farm can pay, have to say, well, golly, is this the decision I want to make in my life? And we're fortunate, I think all small farmers are fortunate, there are young people who see this as an exciting thing for them to do. Whether it's the exciting thing they want to do for the rest of their lives or not, I don't know.
Sari came to gardening through a curiosity about herbs and health.
How did you become interested?
Well, I went to school in Northern California where I studied plants, and I started working at an herb store, and I found great satisfaction in helping people learn how to take care of their own bodies with simple complaints such as cold and flu, menopause, depression, digestion problems. And so, coupled with the plant knowledge and the people knowledge and working together, I find it really rewarding.
Because production cost of organic food on small farms is often higher, Elliott Coleman says small farmers face an inherent struggle.
In Europe, they pay about 17 to 18% of their income on average for food. We pay 11%. And this is making it harder and harder for the small farm to say, okay, we really want to provide you with the best tasting, highest quality, most nutritious food we can, but this takes more effort. And thus far, until we can get people to realize this is something worth paying for, it makes it harder and harder to pay adequate salaries, to get good people to do this, and so there'll be people in the future. I mean, the small farmers you have are probably mostly people like me who have a passion for it and keep doing it because of that passion, but it makes it awfully difficult, like in the movie The Graduate, to walk up to some college kid and say, I only have 2 words to say to you, son, market gardening, because at the moment, That wouldn't be an honest statement to make.
The ultimate question, of course, is whether someone like Siri can make a go of it, or if she will one day have to make another career choice.
Really, it all comes down to lifestyle decisions and compromises, and to tell you the truth, if you want to do something like this for a living, it does take some sacrifices, and you have to weigh those sacrifices. Do you want to make $80,000 a year or more, or can you get by with 20 to 30 and have wonderful food and family and lifestyle, and which to me is the best riches you could ever accommodate. So that's why I'm really making it a priority to figure out how to make this work for me.
Well, good. Well, I hope it does.
Yeah, thank
Thanks
you.
for talking with me.
Thank you.
Bye. It's hard to imagine anything any more spectacular than flowering crab apples in springtime. This red variety is a Rudolph. This white variety is Queen's Choice. So fragrant. It's also hard to imagine what you would do with the privilege of creating a garden on 250 acres. That's exactly what Frederick Law Olmsted did 125 years ago here at the Arnold Arboretum.
The Arnold Arboretum is the crown jewel of a string of Boston public parks and gardens known as the Emerald Necklace. Lilacs, according to head propagator Jack Alexander, put the polish on the gem.
When it comes to lilac-colored lilacs, I think Assisipi is my favorite. But then I've been accused of having too many favorites. It was introduced by Frank Skinner of Canada, and he named this plant after the village in which he grew up in, I think. It's a small village in Manitoba. This is Maiden's Blush. It's one of Skinner's hybrids. Skinner was a Canadian hybridizer. So many good lilacs came out of France that good lilacs are commonly known as French hybrid lilacs, but there were some excellent hybrids that have come from Canada and from the United States. Although it's not in bloom yet, this is the oldest lilac in our collection. It's a Japanese tree lilac. It won't be in bloom for another month. But it's really a stunning plant. It would make a nice patio plant. They're being used sometimes along city streets too, because they'll stay small enough to do well underneath electrical wires. Now here we have a lilac that is here by the side of the road, right in a very conspicuous spot, and it's named for Frederick Law Olmsted, the man who designed the Arnold Arboretum.
Alexander, a dean among lilac experts nationwide, credits his protege, Steve Schneider, with keeping the collection looking its best.
Hey Steve, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
Jack tells me you're the guy in charge of keeping this place looking great.
I am.
Now this looks like you've got a restoration project going on here. It's an older lilac, probably pretty typical. I know the number one question we get is when to prune. You want to prune after bloom. But how do you rejuvenate a plant like this?
Well, with this plant, I've been taking out 1/3 of the plant every year, and I'll be doing that for 3 years. Last year I started, so it'll be this year and the year after.
Now 1/3 of the plant, so you're going in something like this, and
Yes.
you're cutting that right out.
I'm going to take it right down to the ground because we want to encourage the growth to spur up from the ground here.
Okay.
We don't want to, say, cut it right here and leave this, because eventually this is going to become much bigger, and this is going to be a weak connection right here.
I see. So really rejuvenating from the ground. A lot of homeowners might be tempted to cut those up. You're saying no, don't do
No,
that.
you want to leave that, and you want to make sure that you don't mow over it.
Good lilacs should have flowers from the top of the plant, all the way right down, say, to your ankles. Good lilacs should have blossoms where you can smell them, where you can see them. And good lilacs should look good from across the street.
Okay.
Most people see your garden from a distance.
Right.
Only you get to see it close up.
Now, Mr. Olmsted, who designed this 125 years ago, seemed to have that in mind. He put the lilacs right near what then would have been a cart path.
Yes, he did. Yeah, but it was a cart path that would obviously have a lot of public traffic.
Mm-hmm.
And he put them on a hillside where they could be viewed well from the road. I think he showed great foresight in putting them there.
Yeah.
Historically, there seems to have been some question by our first director as to whether or not that was the best siting. And Olmsted won out. He wanted the plants where the public could see them.
There really isn't a showier spring plant when you add in the fragrance factor.
The public would seem to agree with you. But just stop and think about what it was like with this old abandoned farm, and you could do with it whatever you wanted to make a garden. And it was Wilson who called it America's greatest garden. So to take an abandoned farm and turn it into America's greatest garden, what an opportunity. Having a nursery background, I tend to plant in long straight rows. I'm not a good designer, but I can recognize good design. And Olmsted was just a master.
It would be impossible to experience all the Arnold Arboretum has to offer in just one visit. Jack Alexander's been here 27 years and he says he still hasn't seen it all. But whether you come for Lilac Sunday or any time of year, I recommend that you visit and visit often.
Too many people start their tomato seedlings way too early each year. They get itchy fingers and sow those seeds back the 1st of March, and by now they have plants that are 2 feet tall. And what's worse, the year turns out to be cold and wet with late frost and they can't get them into the ground, and next thing you know, the plants are 3 feet tall, going from bad to worse. Now this is an absolutely perfect seedling, and it's only 6 weeks old. Better to wait for a week or two after frost to plant your tomatoes and time your seeding accordingly. Now, this bed has already been limed and fertilized with a good slow release fertilizer. It's jacketed in black polyethylene mulch, which is raising the temperature underneath 5 to 10 degrees, and there's nothing a tomato likes more than good toasty roots. Now you'll notice a ridge running the length of the plastic, and the explanation for that is that I've buried a length of soaker hose right under the plastic. And when I want to water, all I have to do is hitch up the hose to this nice slow release piece of recycled rubber tire, and I can water the tomatoes without worrying about getting water on the foliage, because it's wet foliage that's the principal cause of leaf diseases that causes all the leaves to fall off by midsummer. Now, as for planting, I'm going to space these plants 2 feet apart in the row. I take my trusty pocket knife and cut a little X slit right in the plastic, fold the ears out of the way, and with a trowel, dig a hole. No need to lift the soil over the plastic, just push it to one side. And down in the bottom of the hole, I'm going to put a level tablespoon of mycorrhizal fungi. Now, mycorrhizal fungi have been familiar to foresters for years, but they're rather new to home gardeners, especially vegetable gardens. It's a symbiotic fungus that forms a partnership with plant roots, gets sugar and carbohydrates from the plant, and in return helps the plant pick up valuable nutrients from the soil. This is the first time I've tried it. The instructions say put a tablespoon in the bottom of the hole where it'll get good contact with the roots. Oh, take a look at the roots on this seedling. They're not at all pot bound. That's just about perfect. The ball goes into the ground about half an inch or an inch deeper than it was in the pot. This is a variety called Sun Gold, a cherry tomato that forms clusters of bright orange cherry-sized fruits. Absolutely delicious. Just firm it in. If you have a great long stem, you may be tempted to bury that stem down a foot or two. you can get away with that, but then the roots are down where the soil is cold, and cold soil will stunt the growth of any tomato plant. Another reason to have a nice young transplant. Once it's planted, it needs to be watered in well. Now you'll notice that I didn't plant this plant right next to the stake. I'm going to stake these plants, but by a different system. I have a stake every 2 plants down the row. And the training system that I'm going to use is called tomato weaving, in which I take a piece of string, pass it around a post, one side of the first plant, the other side of the next plant, and around the post. On the way back, I'll reverse the pattern, and as the summer goes on, I'll add additional strings. By the end of the summer, I'll have a solid wall of tomato foliage, all held up just beautifully. Leeks don't have to be planted quite as early as bulbing onions, but nevertheless, they're a long season crop and should be planted early. I have 2 varieties here. King Richard is the larger of the 2. Arkansas is shorter, but can be left in the ground over the winter. Now both varieties get planted in a 6-inch deep trench so that the leaf bases can be blanched and will stay nice and white. I confess that I didn't sow the seeds for either of these varieties. I bought so-called community pots where there are multiple seedlings growing in together, but there must be at least 50 or 60 leeks, and it's simply a matter of teasing the seedling apart. There you have 2 very nice leek seedlings. They go in the bottom of this 6-inch deep trench, spaced just about 6 inches apart. I'm going to be putting in a double row, and in the course of the summer, I'll be pulling soil down from the sides of the trench, adding a little fertilizer every few weeks. And by September, expect to find the ground level and down underneath the most wonderful, big, fat, white leek stems. Oh, just wait till you taste them. It's the first thing you see at any garden center in the spring. Bank after bank of beautiful blooms. They're called bedding plants, annuals mostly, and they're intended to be planted en masse for maximum visual appeal. Now, some people call these plants traffic stoppers, petunias, marigolds, salvia, and they certainly stop customers. Thanks to a multi-billion-dollar bedding plant industry, there are more varieties of these plants to choose from every year. The only problem is, which one do you pick for your own garden? It's incredibly tempting to walk by and just choose the specimens that look best in combination at the moment. Take this Dreams Midnight Petunia, a deep, velvety purple bloom, and contrast that with the snow white one next to it. Is this any different than the cook who goes shopping for supper in the grocery store and buys whatever catches his and her eye at the moment? Well, the answer is yes. There is a difference between groceries and bedding plants. For starters, the groceries aren't still growing. Plants have 2 growth stages. The first begins with the seed germination and extends to the first flower. This is the point at which the plant puts on size. The second stage, as the name suggests, is bloom. Now, these are annuals, and annuals are genetically programmed to bloom all summer long. But blooming and growing are antagonistic. And a plant that's in bloom will go on growing, but at a much slower rate. Now, what does this mean to the home gardener? It means that when you go shopping for a plant, look for a plant that is not yet in bloom, because the more flowers that a plant has at the moment, the less chance there is for significant additional growth. Let's compare this marigold. Boy, hard to miss that bright orange color. But that's not as good a choice as these marigolds, which are still in the vegetative state. Or compare these two plats of lobelia. Vegetative, flowering. Yes, you're gonna have to trust the tag. This is going to be a bright yellow marigold when it blooms. It's not blooming now, but when you take it home, pop it out of its six-pack, put it in the garden, it's going to go on growing. If it already has a flower on it, like this one, and you put it in your garden, snap off that flower, discard it. I know, painful, but the plant will go on growing, and when it does bloom, it's going to be a bigger, more dramatic specimen. You'll get much more bang for your buck. I know, delayed gratification is not something that any of us are good at, but when it comes to buying annual bedding plants, less now, really and truly, is more later.
Roger, where are you?
Over here in the backyard, Paul. There is nothing better than the taste of a tomato picked and eaten not 5 feet from the plant. Try that. Pretty nice, huh?
It is. I should have known where to find you in anybody's backyard.
That's our show for today, folks. But be sure to join us next time.
And thank you for watching People, Places, and Plants, where every week we give you information, inspiration,
And an invitation to have your garden and eat it too.